Welcome to Lost Radio.
Listener, you didn't stumble here. You were guided through thousands of choices. The algorithm whispered your name, and now you're here. Headphones on, listening to something you were never meant to find. Coincidence? Or invitation?
That night, under a full moon hanging like a silver plate above the Arizona desert, I, Arden Vale, drove my old pickup through a dusty road lined with thorn bushes. Dust clung to the windshield, to my throat, leaving a dry taste that said one thing: clearly this land did not welcome anyone for long. The wind hissed between the rocks, whispering like voices from behind my seat, voices that leaned close enough to breathe on my neck and vanished. Somewhere far away came strange sounds, growls mixed with howls, rolling over the dark ridges and striking the metal of the truck in hollow waves. Every bump of the tires over the sand felt alive, as if the earth beneath could open its eyes and look back. I remembered my grandfather. He'd lived near this land all his life, and he knew the things that shouldn't be named after dark. "Arden," he once said, "there are shadows not meant for human eyes. There are voices that sound like family but aren't. And there are doors once opened that no longer lead home." He never explained much. His voice was gravel and smoke, like a stone dropped into my pocket so I'd remember its weight. That stone felt heavy tonight. The desert had a smell. Cooling rock after a burning day. Dry plants. The faint scent of fur and dust mixed with old blood. Moonlight spilled across the dunes, drawing jagged silver teeth on the ridges, slipping down into the hollows between cliffs. The shapes it painted pulled my eyes into places too dark to be empty. People say, look at the road, not the dark. But what is forbidden always hums the loudest. I turned a bend, gravel snapping under the tires. In the mirror, a flash of orange flickered, then died. Probably reflection, I told myself. Maybe moonlight off glass. But it didn't look like reflection. It glowed, like a coal that breathed. I turned off the radio. Silence pressed in. Not real silence. There was rhythm inside it. A pattern. A kind of watching. Maybe it's nothing, I thought. Coyotes. The wind. The usual lies people tell themselves to keep walking forward. But under the thin layer of reason, something scratched. Here, in this land, they tell stories of those who once were human. They wore the skins of beasts, learned the breath of dust, and slid through the night as if the dark itself carried them. They hunt, not because they need to, but because they remember what fear tastes like. I'd laughed when I first heard those tales, thinking they were bedtime warnings. I wasn't laughing now. Then it came. A howl, human and not. It carried vowels too long, like something imitating speech. I flicked the headlights, 3 short bursts, my small ritual of courage. The beams swept across the sand and cut through a shape running beside me. I froze. It was fast, long-limbed, gliding low, too light for its own size. Its feet barely touched the ground, and when it looked up, I saw the eyes. Not yellow, not green, red-orange, burning like twin embers stirred by breath. I eased the gas pedal. The thing slowed too, keeping pace, side by side. It wasn't chasing. It was studying. Then it made a sound. A rasp first, then a pitch. It was copying me. The car horn. Distorted. Warped. But the rhythm exact. I clenched the wheel, every tendon screaming. It honked again, then mimicked the engine. Each rev I made, it echoed, half a second late. That half-second delay was worse than the sound itself, because it was almost me. I swerved into an open patch and killed the engine. Moonlight poured down, bleaching everything pale. The air stilled. No sound but my pulse. I stepped out. Sand looked smooth, but felt cold, tight, like skin over a drum. Then I saw the tracks. Deep gouges, long as my arm, claw marks raked through packed earth. Too heavy to be light, too straight to be random. It didn't make sense, and that made it worse. My grandfather's voice surfaced again. If you hear a howl near, don't turn around. If you hear a loved one at the door, don't answer. If you see the glowing coal on the sand, don't follow. Wind shifted, brushing something warm across my neck. A smell, burnt fur, wet ashes, hide dried and folded under moonlight. Behind me, space moved. I didn't turn. Rules are rules. I closed my eyes, breathed in slow to 7, opened them again. In front of me, the sand had shifted. A circle of bones lay exposed. Tiny, imperfect, yet deliberate. At its center, a strip of dark, brittle hide. That had not been there before. I backed away, step by step, keeping my eyes on the bones. My hand found the truck door, and I slipped inside, locking it. The engine's roar felt like prayer. As I pulled away, the headlights caught it. 2 red dots right at the rim of the bone circle. Watching, waiting. I didn't look again. The desert stretched endless. Each curve looked like the last. I thought of the map folded in the glove box. The small Navajo village ahead. The old man who might still remember which names belonged to men and which to monsters. I thought of salt, of silver, of smoke. The road dipped into a low valley, soft sand gleaming under the moon. There, a cabin, half buried, its roof sagging, windows broken like blind eyes. I hadn't meant to stop, but something in the dark tugged at my gaze. I slowed. The air cooled another notch. Then, a sound. A soft scratching, delicate as nails on thin metal. 3 taps. Silence. 3 again. And a whisper. I cut the engine. Moonlight drew a silver line across the door. I walked closer, each step sinking into sugar-fine sand. I stopped before the wood. Rough, splintered, dry as old bone. I didn't knock. I waited. And then a voice, clear, human. It said my name. Arden. My sister's voice. The name fell heavy, like a dropped stone in an empty house. It couldn't be her. Not here. Not tonight. But she kept speaking, telling memories no one else knew. The feather clip I gave her at 13. The night of the meteor shower. The apology I'd promised and never said aloud. Those pieces of truth came through the crack like smoke. Warm, familiar, safe. And that was what made them deadly. I stepped back. Didn't speak. Speaking would mean sharing breath, giving it my warmth. Instead, I reached under my shirt and pulled out a small pouch of salt. I scattered it along the threshold, a thin white arc on the dark ground. Then I whispered not to the door, but to myself, tomorrow. I turned, climbed back into the truck, and drove. In the mirror, the doorway was a black mouth. The salt line, a pale scar under the moon. The voice behind me didn't call again. It didn't have to. It already knew I'd heard. The rest of the road wound like a string pulled tight. Somewhere, in the same rhythm as my tires, something else was running. Not out of hunger, not out of need, but out of patience. I didn't look, didn't answer the faint howls that rose again from the dunes. I just drove, steady, silent, eyes fixed on a distant light that flickered on the horizon. A light that might be a village, or a fire, or the beginning of something I wasn't ready to name. The light grew larger as I drove, pulsing between the dunes like a heartbeat I could see. By the time I reached it, the moon had shifted west, dragging its cold edge across the desert floor. It wasn't a village. Just 3 houses, half buried in sand, and one small fire trembling in front of them. Beside the fire sat a man wrapped in blankets, his hair long and silver. He didn't look surprised when I stopped the truck. He just lifted his chin and said, "You've seen it." His English was rough, but steady. I nodded. He pointed at the fire, motioning me closer. The closer I came, the more the flames seemed to shift. Orange one moment, white-blue the next. The air smelled of juniper smoke and something sharper. Sage, salt, maybe both. He introduced himself simply. K. White Feather. His eyes were black stones reflecting the fire. "You're not the first," he said. "Others came. Some stayed. The desert keeps what it likes." I told him what I'd seen. The eyes, the mimicry, the voice. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he took a long breath and fed another piece of wood into the flames. "Skinwalker," he said softly. The words slid out like smoke through old teeth. Once they were healers, singers, medicine men. Then they broke the law of balance. To know a curse, they tried to become it. To kill evil, they wore its skin, and the desert listened. It gave them speed, strength, hunger, and took away their souls. I watched the flames curl around his fingers as he spoke. The fire didn't burn him. It just danced, as if it knew his rhythm. "Why mimic voices?" I asked. He turned toward the dark horizon. "Because they forget their own," he said. "They steal the sound of the living to remember what they lost." The fire cracked, throwing sparks into the cold. Each spark looked like a falling star that didn't make it to heaven. "Can they be stopped?" I asked. He stared at me for a long time. "Stopped," he repeated. "Not by killing. You can't kill what's already between worlds. But you can bind, contain, remind them of what they were." He stood, joints creaking like old wood. From a pouch around his neck, he pulled out a small bone charm tied with red thread. He placed it in my hand. The bone was smooth, almost warm. "Carry this," he said. "When it grows cold, it means one walks near." He drew a circle in the sand with a stick, marking points around it with salt. "This is the boundary. Keep to its pattern. Step wrong, and you invite them in." I memorized the marks. 4 small mounds of salt, 1 line broken, 1 joined. It looked simple, but when I tried to redraw it, my hand shook. He watched silently, then covered my hand with his. "Don't think of it as defense," he whispered. "Think of it as memory, a way to tell the desert you still belong to life." The bone in my palm pulsed once, faint, like a heartbeat. He motioned to the cabin I'd passed earlier. "There's a story buried there," he said. "A man came years ago, a researcher, like you. He wanted to prove the legend false. They found his journal. They didn't find him." The fire swayed low. For a moment, his face disappeared behind the smoke. When he leaned forward again, his eyes were wet and dark. "If you must go there, go before the next moonrise," he said. "After that, even the stars turn away." He rose, walked toward the house behind him, and stopped at the door. Without looking back, he added, "Remember, they sound like the ones you love, because they hate what love feels like." Then he was gone, swallowed by the doorway and the shadows beyond. I sat by the fire until it turned to ash. The desert was quiet again, too quiet. When I climbed into the truck, the bone charm was cold. The road back to the cabin stretched pale under the moon. Every mile felt thinner, like reality itself was losing weight. The wind no longer came in gusts. It flowed, smooth, continuous, like breath from something large and unseen. When the cabin appeared again, it looked different. It wasn't just old. It was listening. The windows glimmered faintly, reflecting no stars. Inside, a light moved, not steady, like someone carrying a lamp with shaking hands. I parked, engine off, hand still on the key. The charm lay in my palm. It was colder than metal now. I stepped out, salt pouch in one hand, flashlight in the other. The air felt thick, like water, trying to remember how to be air. The sand muffled my steps. No crunch, no echo. The door of the cabin hung open. It hadn't been open before. I swept the light across the floor. Old boards, papers, a table with something on it. A journal. Its cover was cracked, pages bloated by old moisture. The first page carried a name, David Collins. The last entry was dated 12 years ago. The ink was faint, words leaning downhill as if written by a trembling hand. It calls at night now, sometimes as my mother, sometimes as my own voice. The salt lines fade by morning. I redraw them, but it laughs. Last night, I saw it wear my face. I closed the journal. Every wall of the cabin had scratches, high, like something had climbed them. And on the far wall, burned into the wood, was a single line of text. If it speaks in your voice, run. A cold draft passed through the open window. The flame of my flashlight flickered, then steadied. Outside, the wind had stopped again. Silence, the kind that isn't empty, but crowded with listening. Then I heard it, my own voice. From the darkness outside, calm, familiar, calling, "Arden, it's me." The light shook in my hand. I froze. It spoke again. Same tone, same rhythm, every syllable mine. And then a pause, followed by laughter that didn't belong to anyone alive. I stepped back, heart hammering against ribs that no longer felt attached. The salt pouch tore open in my shaking hand, scattering white grains across the floor. They shimmered under the flashlight, forming a crude half-circle. Something moved at the doorframe. A shadow taller than me, thinner, shoulders bent the wrong way. Its head tilted slowly, like a curious animal. The air around it shimmered. Heat or hunger, I couldn't tell. It took one step forward and stopped. The salt hissed. The creature leaned down, lips pulling back, revealing teeth that looked too human. Then my voice again, whispering, "You can't stay awake forever." I did not sleep. Sleep would have been a door, and I had already heard enough voices behind doors. I backed to the corner of the cabin, set the flashlight upright so the beam climbed the wall, and poured a clean circle of salt around my boots. The half-moon I'd spilled earlier glittered like frost. I completed it, slow, careful, breath steady. The wind didn't return. Silence pressed its ear to the cracks in the wood. The bone charm lay in my palm, cold enough to ache. On the table, beneath the journal, I found an old field radio, dented, battery taped, antenna crooked like a finger asking for quiet. I turned the dial. Hiss, static, drift, then a thin line of sound. "Dr. Elena Vargas," I said, in a voice lower than my own. "Arden Vale, if you can hear me, I need the binding steps." For a long moment, nothing. Then the static changed. Not clearer, just more intent. Her voice arrived like a thread pulled through fabric. "Arden, I hear you." Her words were thin, the desert chewing on them as they came. "Do you have salt?" "Yes." "Juniper? Sage?" "A bundle." "Silver?" I lifted the knife from my belt. The blade winked once in the lamp beam. "Good," she said. "Listen carefully. You're not trying to kill anything. You are trying to remind something. This ritual is a mirror. If you hold the mirror steady, it must look." I swallowed. "Say the sequence," I whispered. She did. "First, sweep the center clean. A palm of sand for each direction. East, south, west, north. Lay salt where the sand is thin. Set juniper at the east, sage at the west. North is for breath, and south for bone. Second, light the herbs. Let smoke rise. Do not blow. You wave it with your hand and your heartbeat. Third, the silver stays hidden until you hear your own voice. Not a cousin, not a friend. Your voice. Then you show the blade. Not to cut, to shine. Fourth, speak the remembering. Not a prayer, a list of human things. Bread, water, names, promises kept. You hold them up like stamps, and keep stamping until the desert yields. Fifth, if it crosses the salt, cut the air at the boundary. Not flesh, air. You are closing a mouth you cannot see. The radio hissed. Her breath carried a tremor through the wire. "Last thing, Arden," she said, voice thinned to a ribbon. "It may use your sister again. It may use you. If it says what you've never told anyone, keep your mouth shut. It can't enter a closed room." The bone charm in my hand pulsed twice, faster than before. The radio thinned to static and went silent. I cleared the floor, scooped palms of sand and dust, dragging them outward with my boot heel. east, south, west, north, leaving a hard, pale circle the size of a grave. Salt went down in a line firm enough to hold a boundary and a breath. Juniper boughs to the east, sage to the west. North I left open, a thin notch for air and the old names. South I marked with the bone charm, threading its red tie around a nailhead hammered long ago into the floor. I struck the lighter. Flame kissed juniper. A column of fragrant smoke unrolled like a scroll and rose, slow and vertical, until it found the low rafters and widened into a blue fan. Sage caught next. Sweeter, bitter under the tongue, a taste of rain that hadn't fallen yet. I didn't blow. I waved, palm open, then closed, like a slow bellows in the lungs. The smoke gathered over the circle and settled, a thin roof. Outside, something walked around the cabin. Boards creaked. Sand moved. No hurry. It traced the walls the way a finger traces a scar. Arden, my sister said, from the window. I didn't look. Not at first. When I did, I kept my eyes low, watching the sill. The sill had fresh marks, 5 long grooves, spread like the hand of a giant. Arden, it's cold out here, she said, breath fogging the broken pane. My name in her mouth felt right, and that was wrong. I lifted the knife. I didn't point it. I angled it until the blade found the smoke and took a ribbon of light. Silver shone. Very softly, in my own voice, outside the window. Not hers, show me, it said. I began the remembering. My words weren't beautiful. They were plain, like bread. Fire that boils water, I said. Hands that break bread. Feet that ache and heal. Names given at birth, and names taken in marriage. Sores that sting. Knees that kneel, not because they are forced, but because they are grateful. The smoke trembled, then steadied. The shape at the window tilted its head. A shadow mouth formed. You never told her, it said. My voice. Exact. Told who? I asked without meaning to. The truth, it said. The day you left. The reason. How you chose the road over her, and called it science. My throat closed. Smoke grazed my lips. I didn't answer. Keep going, I told myself, quietly. Keep the mirror steady. Water for the fever, I said. Quilts that smell like cedar chests. Forks on plates in the evening. Keys that open the same door, night after night. The thing at the window leaned closer. I saw the eyes now. They weren't red. They were empty. Dark pits that remembered being red. It dragged one claw across the sill and touched the salt line I'd laid there before. Steam rose. It hissed, choked, and drew back with an animal shudder that felt almost human. I thought of K. White Feather's hands, steady over the fire. Not defense, he'd said. Memory. I named more. Shoes left by the door. A father's cough in winter. Paper folded for a letter, kept even when the words fade. Soft hair after rain. The sound a mother makes when she laughs and doesn't cover her mouth. The smoke seemed to lower, thickening into a veil. Outside, the footsteps multiplied. Not one, several. Circling. A slow, patient orbit. I felt the cabin lean, not in the wood, but in the idea of the wood, as if the room itself had remembered another shape and wanted to try it on. A whisper threaded the crack beneath the door. Arden. Not my sister. Not me. Something else that wore both and neither. Let me give it back, it said. Give what? Your apology. I lifted the knife higher so the silver caught the smoke and threw it back as cold light. Bread, I said. Water. Names. Promises kept. A weight shifted on the roof. Claws gritted on shingles. The room sighed. Dust, sifting from the rafters like slow rain. The first slam came from the west wall, hard enough to bend the nail that held the charm. The red thread tightened, creaked, held. A second slam. South. The bone went cold as ice and clicked against the nailhead like a tooth. A third. The door flexed inward, boards complaining like old men. I cut the air above the salt with the flat of the blade. Not striking. Sealing. The sound it made wasn't metal. It was a wet mouth closing. Outside, laughter scraped like stones rolled in a dry riverbed. Little songs, something said. Little human songs. Do you think they will keep you when your eyes learn the dark? Not songs, I answered. Receipts. I spoke more, plain and stubborn. Breakfast dishes in the sink. A phone that rings at the wrong hour. The grace set over a table without looking at our hands. Socks with holes that we keep anyway. The way a stranger says sir and means it. The floor beneath the circle warmed. A slow heat, as if the earth had rolled closer to the fire. I felt the warmth rise through my boots and into my calves, an old animal comfort stitching itself into my bones. Then the thing at the window spoke in a different voice. My father's. He'd been dead 5 years. Son, it said. Just that. A word I had not heard with breath, behind it since the hospital. Every muscle in me went slack and then pulled tight. Smoke wavered. The silver dimmed. The bone charm ticked like a clock running out. Don't, I told my mouth. Gentle and stern, the way he used to. Keep the room closed. Son, the voice said again, and added a sentence no one else could have known. Something small and private and kind. A hallway talk between two men not sure how to hug without breaking. My eyes burned. I stared at the salt until the grains looked like constellations. I named more human things because they were all I had. Hands that tremble but keep tying the knot. Shoelaces that won't listen. A note on the fridge that says back soon and means it. The way old dogs sigh when they are finally allowed on the bed. Something outside paced faster. Footsteps layered over footsteps. The ground scuffed by many feet, trying to learn the same dance. "Come out, Arden," my voice called from the door. "I'm tired. My legs hurt. I need the bed." I heard my exact sigh. The one I make when I pretend to give up. I smiled without humor. "You almost had it," I said to the dark. "But you made me sound kinder than I am." The reply was not speech. It was a buckling of the night. A flex. Like something large, testing the seams of a tent. I pressed the knife flat to the smoke again and sliced the air above the threshold. The cut made the smell of sage bloom bitter and clean. Then I heard the low thunder of hooves. Except there were no horses. The sound came from the earth itself. A tremor rolled under the foundation and sighed out through the cracks. The lamp guttered. The smoke ceiling thinned. "Not here," I said. "To the cabin. To my lungs. To whatever remembered me." Not yet. I took the journal, shoved it inside my jacket, and gathered the remaining salt into the pouch. Juniper and sage I left smoldering on their stones. A pair of small suns. I stepped backward out of the circle, careful not to touch the line. 3 steps, then 6, then the door. Outside, the sky had lowered. Clouds slid over the moon like a lid closing on a pot. The world smelled of iron. Shapes moved in the scrub. Low, long, too many joints. Eyes blinked. Not red, not gold, just wet. They watched without blinking long enough to make it count. My truck sat 30 paces away, its cab a metal prayer. I threw a handful of salt to my left. The handful didn't land. It hung in the air, glittered, then fell as if reconsidering. A voice to my right. "Mine. Left looks good, doesn't it?" I took the path opposite. Moving steady. Never running. Running teaches predators what you are. When I reached the truck, a hand. My hand closed the passenger door from inside. The cab light flicked on. No body in the seat. Just the print of a palm and dust on the dashboard. 5 clean ovals where there shouldn't be any. I opened the driver's side and got in. Keys turned. Engine coughed. Caught. Settled into a low hum. As I put it in gear, something tapped the window, gentle as a fingernail on glass. I didn't look. I rolled forward. the desert opened a throat of road, and I drove into it. For a while, the shapes followed, keeping pace in the sage and greasewood. Then, one by one, they peeled away, as if the distance itself were a slow fire they didn't care to cross. I didn't aim for the 3 houses and the elder's fire. I aimed for the line of ridges that made the moon look like it had teeth. Somewhere in those ridges, White Feather had said there was a place where the desert listened better. A hollow, a throat, a cave. I found it near dawn. Not a mouth in the cliff, but a seam in the ground, opened by time and patience. Cold air breathed from it, carrying the smell of wet stone and old wood smoke. Someone had been here, or still was. I parked behind a screen of juniper and walked the last distance with the knife sheathed and the salt bag tied to my belt. Above the seam, on a flat of red rock, stood 4 stones set in a circle, each carved with lines too shallow to be letters and too precise to be accidents. Between them, a scatter of bones, not arranged, but worn into the shape from being arranged over and over. I knelt. There were marks in the dust, boot treads, a heel dragged, a handprint pressed so hard the skin lines showed. I put my palm over the print. It fit. Behind me, the sky lightened to the color of old ash. Birds started, just one call at first, then others, hesitant. Day did not scare the desert. It only changed the mask. I built the circle again on the rock. East, south, west, north, but larger this time, wide enough for a man to stand and remember himself. Juniper to east, sage to west, the bone charm at south. At north, just breath. I lit the herbs and waited until the smoke stood like a pillar that could hold up a piece of sky. Then I spoke, not to the desert, not to the mouth in the ground, but to the part of the world that still knew my name and meant it. I am Arden Vale, I said. My feet are sore. My stomach is empty. My hands are not clean, but they are mine. A shiver went through the smoke the way wind goes through tall grass. From the seam in the earth came a sound like breath pulled through a flute made of bone. The first shape climbed out on elbows. It didn't rush. It tested each inch of light as if it might bite. When its head cleared the stone, I saw the ears flattened to its skull and the long teeth nested too neatly in its jaw. It sniffed the salt. It flinched. Then it spoke without moving its mouth. Hungry, it said. Not a plea. A statement of law. More shapes crowded behind it. 4, 5, maybe more. I lost count because counting is for things that promise to stay still. I lifted the knife so the sun, weak as it was, found the silver and painted the smoke with it. I began the list again. Steady, And when my voice wanted to run, I made it walk. Bread, I said. Water. Names. Promises kept. The lead shape twitched. Its ears unflattened. A human gesture returned to an inhuman head, and then retreated like a wave that had surprised itself. Arden, my voice said from its throat. Not perfect now. Thinner, as if pulled through wire. Do you remember when you swore never to leave? It asked. Yes, I said. You left, it said. Yes, I said. Truth settled like a stone in my belly. Somewhere behind me, a raven called once. A sound, like a knot tightening. Say the rest, I told myself. Morning coffee that tastes like last night's smoke, I said. Shoes too tight, but we wear them because the job is the job. A name called from a porch at dusk, just to see if we are near. A gate we oil when it squeaks. A small birthday cake. Wrong flavor. Eaten anyway. The shapes shifted their weight. Eyes lowered. One stepped sideways and put its paw. No. Its hand against the salt line. Steam. Hiss. A peel of blackened skin. It didn't cry out. It remembered. The leader pushed forward to the very edge, muzzle almost in the smoke. Its lips shaped a word that took a long time to find its mouth. Name, it said. Whose? I asked. It stared. Mine, it said at last, and the word shook the way the radio had. I didn't know it. There was no safe name to give. But I had a list of human things, and one of them was mercy. Come into the circle, I said. Stand at north. Not across the salt. Through the breath. It hesitated. Then, like a man who has forgotten stairs, it found a way. Not a step, not a lunge. A thinning, a narrowing, a passing where smoke and air agreed to let it through without touching. Inside the circle, the shape altered. Not into a man, never into a man, but into a memory of standing upright. Shoulders rose, hands opened, chest moved once, twice, like it had rediscovered ribs. I kept the knife angled so the light did not fail. Say what you remember, I said. It tried, and when speech broke, it made shapes with its lips that hurt to watch. Milk, it managed. Warm. Bowl. Hand. A woman. Singing? The other shapes at the edge writhed. A sound went through them, like a rope pulled taut. Not anger. Fear. More, I said. Gentler than I meant. Say her name if you can. It couldn't, but it lifted one hand and put it to its chest. Fingers spread, as if to hold something in place that wanted to fall. Smoke thickened. The pillar bent, not from wind, but from weight. The earth boomed again, deeper, closer. From the seam, a larger darkness uncoiled. Slower, heavier, sure. Leader. Not because it was biggest, but because the others leaned toward it the way trees lean toward a wind they can't help. Its eyes were not pits. They were wounds, raw and red around the edges where light had tried to heal them and failed. It looked at the circle and smiled with a mouth that had learned the shape from watching humans and not from having joy. Little room, it said. Voice a braid of many voices. Little breath. Do you think your receipts impress hunger? I didn't answer. I spoke the list again, not to it, to the one inside the circle who had said, milk. First steps on a splintered floor. The ache after laughter. A window opened at night because the room smells like rain. A wrist someone holds to count a pulse. The long, quiet after forgiveness. The leader stepped forward and placed its hand on the salt. It didn't hiss. It smiled wider. Salt blackened. Not from heat. From something like midnight, poured out as liquid. The line broke. Not wide, but enough. The creatures surged. I slashed the air. Fast. East to west. Then south to north. Closing invisible mouths. Reopening others only where smoke was thickest. The silver rang. A high, thin sound that had been waiting years to be released. The leader recoiled, not from the blade, from the memory the blade carried. A face crossed its face. Not a man's, not a beast's, a fleeting third thing that wanted to be both and could be neither. Name, it said. A command that cracked like a whip. The one inside the circle put a hand to its throat. Milk, it whispered again, and a sound that might have been a syllable or a cry tried to climb out and collapsed. I dropped to my knees, pressed my palm into the warm rock, and spoke not in English now, but in the simplest language I had the counting voice of a child. 1 for waking, I said. 2 for bread. 3 for water. 4 for a name. 5 for the hand that writes it. The wind rose. Not the desert wind, but a wind that had been kept in a room too long. It grabbed the smoke and shook it into shapes. Faces, doors, bowls, letters, then tore them apart. The leader reached across the broken line with a hand that looked like a man's until it didn't, and closed its fingers around my wrist. Cold burned. The bone charm went hot as a coal. In reflex, I turned the knife. Not to cut, to mirror. I thrust the silver under its face. Light climbed into its empty eyes and found walls. What looked back was not me, not it, but a room with shelves and bowls, and a blue dress hung from a peg. A woman's hands poured milk. A child clapped. The leader's grip trembled. Behind it, the others howled. Not the desert howl now, but a corridor howl. the sound of something dragged past closed doors. "Name," I said softly to the one in the circle. "Yours, if you can reach it." Its mouth opened. A shape formed on its tongue. 3 strokes, a breath, a break. When it spoke, the word fell like a small stone into deep water. "Key." The rest tore itself on the way out and became a cry. The leader yanked at my wrist with sudden, savage grace. I went forward to the edge of the salt and no farther. My boot heel found the line. Grain against leather. I pressed down, grinding the salt into the rock until it bit back into the dark like teeth. 4 for a name, I repeated, voice steady because it wasn't allowed to be anything else. 5 for the hand that writes it. I lifted the knife again and turned the blade so it showed me my own eyes. Rimmed red, wet, stubborn, and then showed them theirs. Wide, wounded, wanting. "Come back," I said. Not to me, not to them, to the thin place between. Come back enough to remember, not to stay, to leave. Something in the leader's jaw loosened. Its mouth opened, barely, as if a rusted hinge had accepted a drop of oil. I heard a syllable that might once have been a name on a certain mountain, in a certain season, to a certain mother. The sun cleared the ridge by the width of a coin. Light spilled into the circle and filled the smoke from the inside. For a heartbeat, I saw them as daylight would. Not beasts, not people, but broken doors propped open by hunger. The ground boomed again, the deepest yet. Cracks in the rock ticked. A hairline seam ran under the circle like a drawn line deciding whether to be a road or a river. The leader let my wrist go. The one inside the circle raised its head as if a hand under its chin had guided it. It whispered the syllable again, "Key." And this time the second half came, torn and shining nigh. Not a full name, but a piece. The others reeled. The leader snarled with a sound that made the birds take the sky all at once like an overturned bowl. And then the wind that had waited all night arrived with teeth. It tore the smoke roof. It ripped the sage ember from its stone and chased it across the rock like a star that had changed its mind. Salt flew, bright as hail. The circle broke. "Arden," something said behind me. My father's voice, soft, full. "Turn around." I did not. I reached for the last bundle of juniper, struck the lighter, and felt the wind try to steal the flame. It caught anyway, a stubborn blue tongue. I stood, smoke in one hand, silver in the other, name piece in the air. Around me, the hungry moved. Ahead of me, the cave breathed out again, colder than grief. "Part of you remembers," I told the one who had said canine. "Part of me does too. Come with me into the last room." The leader gathered itself. It stepped where the salt had been and smiled its learned smile. "Little room," it said. "Let us make it smaller." The wind closed in like a jaw. The circle lay broken. Salt scattered as bright wreckage across the red stone. Smoke crawled low. No longer a roof, just a patient animal flattening itself before the leap. The leader stepped once, and the world around its foot forgot how to be mourning. Color fell away, a bite taken from day. Behind it, the others pressed like hunger-wearing shapes. I lifted the juniper bundle and drew a slow figure 8 in the air. Not a sign. A path, a way for smoke to remember where to travel. The blue tongue of flame licked the wind and refused to die. "Kenai," I said to the one inside the broken circle. "A name does not need to be whole to mean. Stand with me." It straightened. Not fully, but enough to place shadow on shadow like a man rediscovering balance. Around us, claws clicked. Teeth worked. Breath rushed through throats, not made for air. The leader laughed softly. A dry river, chuckling to itself. "Names," it said, almost tender. "Sugar on the tongue. Let me show you what we do with sugar." It drew a nail across its own palm. No blood, just darkness that poured like tar and steamed where it fell. The droplets hit the scattered salt and turned each grain into a tiny night. I reached my belt and tugged free the last pouch. White Feather had given it to me without a word. Eyes, heavy as coal before the spark. I tore the mouth of the pouch with my teeth. The taste of mineral and desert filled my tongue. This was not table salt. It was salt that remembered oceans. I threw the handful high. The wind tried to claim it, but the grains stitched themselves into a thin white veil that settled over the broken boundary like frost deciding to become glass. The leader's smile tightened. From the seam in the ground, another breath came, deeper, older, the breath of a room that had learned too many names and lost them one by one. It washed across my face and filled my mouth with the taste of burnt hair and winter iron. I swallowed it like a dare. "Dr. Vargas," I whispered to no one visible, "I'm keeping the mirror up." I raised the silver again, not to cut, to shine. The blade caught a sliver of sun and threw it through the smoke so it struck the leader's face like a narrow window opening in a locked cell. For a heartbeat, I saw it flinch. Not from pain, from memory. "Bread," I said. "Water. Names. Promises kept." I added new stamps to the ledger. Spilled milk no one scolds. A hand that stays when the fever breaks. 2 chairs on a porch, both facing east. The wind pushed. I leaned into it. Kenai leaned too, mirroring me without knowing the word. "Little room," the leader purred, stepping until its toes kissed the veil of salt. "Let us make it smaller." It placed its hand on the white film. The grains did not blacken this time. They sang. A high, thin chime ran through the circle, and up the knife, and into my bones. Sound broke something. Not out there. In me. The room I had kept shut. The apology I never gave. The reason I left. The place where my father's last son still sat on a chair and waited its door cracked. Close it, I told my mouth. But my ribs had already opened like a window for a summer that never came. The leader felt it. It pressed harder. The salt veil bowed, held, then bowed deeper like a drum skin that refused to tear. Kenai moved. It placed its own hand, wrong and learning beside the leader's, palm flat. The chime changed. Two tones met, then braided, then found a third that neither could make alone. The leader recoiled, as if the sound had named it. The others writhed at the edge of the light, knocking against each other like logs in a dark flood. Behind us, a soft shuffle. I did not turn. The knife's light reached back for me, reflecting off another blade I could not see. A voice spoke at my shoulder low, river deep, steady as memory, sanded smooth. Do not invite what you cannot feed. White feather. He stepped into the wide morning like a stone joining its river. Juniper smoke curled toward him and settled as if recognizing an old jacket. He did not look at the leader. He looked at the salt. He looked at Kenai's hand. He nodded once. Make the last room, he said. Now. He drew from his blanket a pouch the color of thunder and shook out a pinch of powder that smelled like rain on hot stone. He blew, and the powder didn't scatter, it settled in the air itself, outlining a doorway where there wasn't one. Stand, he told me. Breathe. He began to speak. Not English, not a song. A cadence that felt like walking a path you walked as a child. Feet knowing the turns before the eyes. The powder doorway tightened. Inside its frame, the air went clear, then brighter, then calm. Not safe. Possible. The leader hissed at it the way a cut hisses at water. Little room, it said, mocking gone thin. Little grave. Not a grave, White Feather said. Voice flat as stone. A memory. He cut his own palm with a small silver edge and let 3 drops fall. East. South. West. He kept north clean. Breath, he said. The doorway brightened at the north side, as if a window had been opened there in a house that hadn't stood in years. Arden, he said without looking at me. Say the ledger. Then step. I spoke. Not louder. Truer. Bread. Water. Names. Promises kept. Letters never sent but folded anyway. A porch light left on. A bed made with the good sheets because someone is coming home. Then I stepped through the doorway. It felt like nothing. It felt like everything all at once. My skin remembered rain. My lungs remembered laughing. The knife in my hand remembered being a mirror before it was ever a blade. Kenai followed. It did not brush the frame. It did not bow. It entered with the careful arrogance of someone stepping into a childhood room they thought burned down. The leader tried to enter and could not. Its face wrinkled, not in anger, in confusion. It had not prepared for a door that was not built to keep it out, only built to let someone else in. Inside the last room, time changed. Not stopped. Slowed until each grain of dust chose where to fall. The air smelled like cedar, milk, and hot iron. There was no furniture. There were imprints, places where chairs had stood so long the air kept their shape. Kenai, I said, and the name did not echo. It landed like a coin and stayed warm. Bread, I added, and a loaf that wasn't there filled the room with its heat. Water, I said, and the room remembered cups. Name, I whispered. Not a question, and the room exhaled. Kenai put a hand to its chest and dragged a sound up from a place that did not like light. Kenai, it said. The second syllable stronger, planting a flag. Then another syllable came, soft and careful as a bird landing on a palm. Ta. Kenaita. Maybe not exact, but theirs. Outside the room, the leader howled. The sound knifed through the doorway and broke itself on the edges. White Feather's voice rose, not shouting, widening. Words like old beams slid into place above us, and the room took their weight gladly. Promise, I said to Kenaita. The word hurt my mouth because it wanted truth. Do you want the door to open out? It looked at me with eyes that were still wounds, but now scabbed at the edges with light. Its throat worked. It nodded once. A motion learned from a species that had taught it fear and was now teaching it choice. Say it, I whispered. Say you release what you held. Its mouth-shaped syllables it did not own, but the room lent them. I let go. Outside, something tore. Not cloth, not whether a tether. The leader's howl pitched upward until it became the scream of rust giving way. White Feather stepped into the doorway and set his palm flat to the air at the north side. Breath, he said again, and inhaled. For a moment, we all inhaled together. Man, once man, desert, and the room grew larger, not in size, in permission. Tears stood in his eyes. He blinked them back into his life and turned to me. Now you, he said softly, your closed door. I didn't want to, but he was right. I had asked the night to remember. It had the right to ask me, too. Father, I said, and the chair where he had never sat in this room filled with the weight of him anyway. I left, I said. I chose roads and reasons, and wrote papers about mysteries, because they kept me from your last months. I am sorry. The word did not echo. It settled. It stayed. In the doorway, the powder trembled and then lay down like a tired animal finally allowed to sleep. A wind moved through me that did not chill. The knife lightened in my hand, as if the mirror no longer needed to be so heavy. Kinaita pressed its palm to its chest again and drew a breath that shook. On the exhale, the last of the red fell out of its eyes like embers, giving up the fight and becoming ash ready for soil. White Feather lowered his hand. "Out," he said gently. We stepped back through the doorway into desert morning. The leader stood there with the others behind, caught between the moon's tatters and the sun's first resolve. It looked smaller now, not by measure, by meaning. It glanced at Kinaita, and I could not read the gesture. Envy, grief, rage some not, of all three. "Leave," White Feather told it, his voice older than his bones. "You have eaten enough of our dark. Go to your own." It hissed without teeth, turned, and slid back toward the seam. The others followed, reluctant as dogs dragged from a gate they had worried all night. Kinaita did not go with them. It looked at White Feather. He shook his head once. "Not here," he said. "Not with me. With the wind." He gathered a last pinch of thunder-colored powder, touched it to the bone charm on the nail at my belt, and blew it toward the ridge. It rose, a soft gray ribbon, and Kinaita followed it the way a child follows a string to a kite it cannot yet see. It climbed the air, thinned, and went into light not like smoke, not like mist, like breath returned. Silence came down. Not the crowded kind. The kind with space for a heartbeat to sound like itself. White Feather wiped his blade on his blanket and slid it away. He looked at me. Not through me. At me. "You kept the mirror steady," he said. "Now keep it when no one is watching." We walked back to the truck in a world that had not changed and had. Juniper shook. Birds resumed sentences they had paused at nightfall. The seam in the earth breathed once more, a small sigh, and went quiet. By the time the sun stood clear, the village did not feel like 3 houses. It felt like a mouth learning a new word. Smoke rose. Not from fear, from breakfast. Children stared at me, and then at White Feather, and then at my hands as if expecting to see light leak out. Old women nodded once. The nod of, "We have more to do." Men carried water like it had always weighed that much, and always would. At dusk, the drums started, not loud, low and even, like a heart deciding it will keep going. There was dancing, not for show, for balance. Feet spoke to dust, and dust answered, and the conversation was older than all of us. I stood at the edge until a small boy took my sleeve and tugged me forward 2 steps, just enough to say, "You are not outside." White Feather watched from his chair, eyes reflecting fire, and a little mischief that said he knew exactly how hard it is to stand where you are put. When the drums paused, he rose and placed his hand on my shoulder. "An old thing let go," he said. "Not because you forced it, because you remembered for it until it could remember for itself." He turned to the people and spoke the words a community says when a thorn is finally worked free. Words that tasted like smoke and salt and relief. No one cheered. They nodded, and the nod was a blessing with both feet on the ground. Night came kind. Stars stepped out carefully, as if they remembered last night and wanted to make amends. The moon rose later, smaller, a silver bowl rather than a plate. I walked away from the fire to the edge of the houses where the land began to forget we were there. The bone charm warmed against my chest. Not warning now. Witness. "Arden," a voice said behind me. "Not my sister. Not my father. Not the night." Elena Vargas stood in the shadow of a truck I hadn't heard arrive. Hair pulled back, eyes rimmed by a drive that had eaten hours and miles. "You made it," I said. She smiled, a tired smile, the kind that puts the world down gently. "I heard enough," she said. The line went dead, and then the quiet changed. Scientists don't have a word for that, so I drove. We didn't talk long. There wasn't much to say. Sometimes the body needs quiet to file what the soul has scribbled all day. When morning came, it wasn't a victory so much as permission. Wind moved through the sage with the soft authority of a caretaker who has found the right key. No eyes glowed in the scrub. No mimicry-tested doors. The desert had decided to belong to itself again. I took the road out at a steady pace. The truck sounded like a truck. The horn sounded like a horn. When I pressed it, no echo made fun of me from the brush. On the ridge above the last switchback, I stopped and stepped out. Below, the land stretched like an old back finally unknotting. To the east, light pooled in a shallow valley. To the west, night lingered in folds and hollows, not unwelcome, just true. I thought of the cabin, of David Collins's journal pressed against my ribs like a second heart. I would carry his pages to a place that could keep them dry and read. I would write the ledger down with honest ink. Bread, water, names, promises kept. Somewhere above the ridge, a hawk carved the sky and stitched it back together behind itself. The sound it made wasn't a cry. It was a statement. I laid a small line of salt on the rock, not for defense now, for gratitude. I set the bone charm beside it and let the sun warm, both until they smelled faintly of the sea that had once dreamed this desert. "Grandfather," I said to the wind that had waited a long time to be named. I did not turn at the howl. I did not answer the wrong door. I followed the right one through. A breeze rose. Brief, amused and folded itself into my jacket. back in the truck. I put the road under me until the red rocks softened into flats, and the flats into a ribbon of highway that led toward other towns. Other lights, other doors. I knew now that the mirror could be carried. It did not need walls. It needed a hand willing to hold it level. At a gas station 2 hours later, a kid with a name tag reading Tessa handed me a receipt. She said, "Have a good one, the way people do when they mean please be safe." I said, "You too," and meant I will try. On the horizon, a line of cloud shone like a scar that had decided to be beautiful. Some scars do. Most just stop hurting. When night found me again, I pulled over on a high shoulder and cut the engine. No voices moved in the scrub. The air around the truck was simply night. A companion, not a test. I lay back and watched the sky do what it has always done. Fold, unfold, breathe. Somewhere below me in the valley, a single porch light clicked on. A door opened. A human voice called another human name, and the name answered. I closed my eyes. Not a door. A window. I slept. In the days that followed, I sent the pages to Alina, and she sent back the kind of silence that means working. We spoke in short lines. Arrived. Archived. Cross-checking oral. Histories. No sensational language. Neither of us wrote the word Skinwalker. Neither of us needed to. Whitefeather's people did not ask me to stay. They did not ask me to go. They waved when I waved. When I returned weeks later with supplies in the bed of the truck, salt, flour, nails, coffee, the boy who had tugged my sleeve ran up to the bumper and pointed proudly at the sky, where hawks were busy being hawks. We stood together a minute and let them be. At night by their fire, someone would glance at the ridge where the seam lay, and then look back at the cup in their hand. That is how a people tells itself a story it needs, by choosing to drink, not to stare. One evening, Whitefeather pressed the bone charm back into my hand. "It's warm now," I said. "It will be," he answered. "Carry it when you forget what your hands are for." "What are they for?" I asked. He smiled the kind of smile that puts a chair by the door and leaves it there. "To hold a mirror," he said. "To pass bread. To keep promises." I left before dawn. The moon was a shaving, thin and clean. The road ahead did not threaten. It invited. Behind me, the desert did what deserts do when no one is watching. Kept everything and gave everything back. Somewhere in the high light above the ridge, breath lifted, turned, and went on.